Hi there, and welcome to the ATS podcast with me, Will Brown, and John Soulsby, where we break down chunks of health and fitness information into bite sized pieces, remove a bunch of the noise, and just leave what's relevant. Today we are on episode 30, and our topic for today is BMI, body mass index, useful or terrible?
Yeah. So I think my opinion of this definitely changed over the whatever it is, 8, 10 years of kind of coaching people now. At the start, it was definitely like the stupidest thing going around, like totally irrelevant for most people, and doesn't really work. And now much more in the bracket of it is a piece of data that can be used in general. It's used for like kind of mass populations, and you can obviously find like issues with it with any sort of as with pretty much any set of data like the one as I was looking up today. It's like someone was saying BMI is terrible because an Olympic athlete like has a BMI of like 32, and it's like pretty much any data set that is made for normies gets totally thrown out the window by Olympic athletes.
Yeah, they are literally the end of the bell curve people. They are
Yeah,
the anomalies in
yeah,
most data sets.
yeah. In pretty much everything, they are the ones that are weird and ruining it for everyone else. So Um, I think BMI in general is, I mean, it was initially made to help governments decide where to put money in certain aspects because then they could use information of their entire population and see what to do with it. So, funnily enough, quite often for the individual, it's not great. However, there's also a ton of data about how essentially for most people, a high BMI is linked with a bunch of comorbidities, which is essentially a bunch of things that kill you.
Yeah, I mean it was also like so it was developed by a Belgian guy called Adolf, coincidence, um,
Mm,
in like 1830.
something like that,
Like
yeah. Fucking brilliant.
it is obviously ye olde timey. However, could people potentially come up with a new algorithm or like a new formula? Like yeah, probably. There are like again, you'd mentioned it's just a data point that is of like could be of significance, but like it's the same as like scale weight. Like it's just a data point. Like it is just it's not your abject social value. You don't walk around with it like
No.
stapled to your head.
Um, and yeah, it's just a useful data. Taking myself as an example of like my BMI has gone from like 34 down to like 29 odd or something like that. But like my actual health over that change has like changed significantly because I've gone from like powerlifter who did no cardio and only lifted weights with a resting heart rate probably in the 70s somewhere, maybe more. I didn't even track it. Whereas now it's like recreational weights, cycling a lot, and my resting heart rate is like 60.
Yeah.
So there's like a bunch of other metrics. So yeah, okay, I'm still technically overweight based on BMI, but as an individual, there's loads of other stuff there that kind of indicates that I'm doing reasonably well.
But yeah, unsurprisingly, something developed in the 18 like the mid to late 1800s didn't really factor in people who recreationally lift weights.
Yeah.
That
So I think
activity that almost didn't exist.
yeah, and I think that would definitely be where like that's the one niche where most commonly you'll hear people being like, "Oh, it just doesn't work," and it's like we are a very small percentage of the population.
Yeah.
There was like a stat that came out over like the pandemic that was something like only 15% of the UK population has a gym membership, and half of them don't use it. So if you think about the amount of people that actually lift weights like regularly, it's probably 5% of the UK population. I think was pretty wild.
Yeah, I think they've actually I just chucked a quick Google on it. Yeah, currently as of 2022 based on the UK Fitness Report, which I believe is like a reasonably cited source
Yeah,
of stuff, it's still at 14%.
yeah,
So, yeah, it's pretty wild. Um, that's actually down from pre-pandemic, which is kind of strange because I thought it would be. I genuinely was betting on it being up after the
being
pandemic,
up.
but
I wonder if the pandemic, because obviously the fitness industry got pretty hammered because you couldn't go for 2 years.
that's
I think a
true.
lot of people have found other ways of
Yeah, very
enjoying
true.
exercise.
Hmm.
Because I
Yeah.
think, as I said, a lot of people, even with gym memberships, A, didn't use it, or B, just use the running machines as an example. So
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
you then went out and actually was like, oh, running's a bit nicer when I'm outside.
Yeah, yeah. In the scenes, yeah. Grass.
Yeah.
Nice
Um,
views.
yeah. Or you're like, I didn't use it anyway, so cancel
Yeah. The I think it is again just a data point. I would not be like realistically if your BMI might point to something that you probably already know anyway. Like
it.
if your BMI is like if you're again fit into one of these people because you're listening to this podcast, so you're probably like interested at least partially in fitness and health. If you're like, oh, my BMI says I'm overweight, but you quite clearly look like you lift in clothes and really don't have a whole bunch of excess fat, you might even know what your body fat percentage is, depending on how seriously you take stuff and if you have access to the equipment to measure it. If you know that, like, you exercise regularly enough to have, like, a decent resting heart rate, a decently controlled blood pressure without medication, you lift weights and have a decent amount of muscle mass, like you have muscle mass versus the normie population,
Yeah. Hmm.
and your BMI is slightly into the overweight or pre-obese class as per your just height and weight, you could probably be like, that's probably fine. Like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Really, probably nothing bad's gonna happen. On top of the fact, if you don't smoke and don't excessively drink, you're pretty
Hmm.
much squeaky clean.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh damn, I haven't lifted weights since I tried to start in January for the first time in like 5 years and have already kind of bailed because it was too difficult. And my BMI says I'm like 35 or 37. Like on my BMI score, it says I'm like obese class 2 or whatever. If you don't do any exercise at all, don't eat the greatest if you're really honest with yourself. Like how many times in a week do you order takeout? If it's probably more than 0 to 1 a week, then you're in this group. And if you're like either drink at least a drink most days, maybe on the weekends pretty heavily, depending on whose birthday it is or what social event it is or anything like that. And your BMI is also 37. You could probably take that as you should probably take that as the early warning it kind of is to be like you should probably get some of your shit together.
Yeah.
Like exercise, do some exercise, get eating some vegetables, stop drinking and eating takeout so frequently. Not don't stop full like whole ham. Don't like wholesale like shut everything
Hmm.
down. Just less, man. Just less.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like, as I say, just one data point. It is heavily linked to a lot of negative health things, but there's also other data points for those as well.
But yeah, having
So,
the
like, if everything else is good, then you probably don't need to worry about your BMI. But if everything
yeah
else is also not great,
yeah you
it's a
should
reasonable
probably
indicator.
take it along with everything else and be like,
Yeah.
ugh. I wouldn't coast on it. Like if you smoke 10 a day, drink heavy on the weekends, and don't exercise, and your BMI is 26, I'd be like, still probably get something done. Like yes, BMI is low, but you still
Yeah.
have a bunch of other things that are risk
It
factors.
works both ways. If you're, even if your BMI is like bang in the center, 22 and a half, like peak apparent, like ideal weight,
Mm.
but you do literally nothing else, it's also not great.
Yeah, it's not the greatest. It could be better. Are you as at much risk as somebody who's a lot closer to like the like mid to high 30s in BMI? Yeah, probably. But depending on what your other risk factors are. If you're just
Yeah.
someone who's constantly slim, doesn't exercise, doesn't smoke or drink, you're okay, but like I would suggest you get into some resistance training and exercise just to
Yeah.
strengthen yourself up a good bit because there'll be a time when you are not like function or you struggle to function or like day-to-day functioning becomes suddenly extremely difficult and that is probably too not too late but you don't want to be trying to catch up from that point.
Yeah.
One thing that was quite interesting that I hadn't really thought of until I was perusing it for this topic is that BMI is also very handy for measuring, very young people, like children and babies, because you only need a height and a
Yes.
weight. Like I can't really imagine trying to do a 14 point fucking caliper body fat test on
Oh,
an infant.
and that's the other one from like a doctor's point of view. Even in adults, it's like you have,
Minutes.
let's say, take as a GP as an example, you have 10 to 15 minutes for your appointment, trying to do a full screen of your resting heart rate, your blood pressure, a fat-free mass index, your calorie, like it's just not. Whereas you're like weight plus height squared or weight times height squared. Right, let's go.
Yeah, that's literally
And
yeah. You can't get much easier.
and irregardless, even if you're fit and healthy, there is an increased risk by being technically overweight based on data. It kind of like so they've got to go off something, and that's a start.
Yeah, it's better than nothing, cause again they need to have some way of grouping people where they can allocate preventative or again potential like monitoring to people who are in certain groups because they will be at a higher risk of certain things happening to them than people who aren't.
Mm-hmm.
I've also just found out that there's a lot of people who view BMI as culturally insensitive, potentially racist. Um, Quite recently, when did this come out? 1998, so quite a while ago.
Yeah, I mean it's potentially true. It was made by a Belgian,
Oh, sorry, incorrect.
probably.
Actually, we've got some stuff in the 2020s and 2021 and 2 where people have UK National Institute for Healthcare Excellence has started kind of what's it refining the categorizations based on um like historical ethnicity of people, like their
Mm-hmm.
backgrounds, especially in country like the UK, especially down south, is like very ethnically diverse, and so they've got different recommendations for people of different
Yep.
ethnicities and races and stuff, which is quite cool because it kind of again, if people are at higher risk at certain points,
Yep.
they will get
Well.
well, hopefully they will get the help and advice they could get sooner,
Yeah.
especially if they would otherwise be too late, or it might be too late some of the time if they were in just the standard bracketing system that was developed
Yeah.
for
I
European
can't
people.
imagine 1830s Belgium was overly ethnically diverse.
No, no, it definitely was. It also probably hadn't got the yeah, it definitely hadn't got the if it wasn't like the reach of data collection that there is now
Yeah.
in terms of being
Exactly.
able yeah, being able to get data on pre like the BMIs of type 2 diabetic people from Afro-Caribbean descent or something in this
Yeah.
specific country for this specific year.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. But yeah, overall, more useful on again scales that most day-to-day people don't really think in, which is probably why it seems so useless.
Yeah.
Don't take it too seriously, although it can be helpful as a point in the right direction. Seems
Yeah.
reasonably fair.
Yeah. Totally.
Cool. And thus ends. So it be said, let it be said. BMI is, I
Yeah.
final verdict.
Stop the hate.
Yeah, stop the hate. All right, catch you guys later.
See you later.